I've been trying to think of how I could leverage all the space underneath my outfeed table on my table saw when I came across plans for this roll-around tool cart in issue number 54 of ShopNotes magazine. And there will be a link in the description below where you can get your own copy of it. This is a great place to store rarely used benchtop power tools or hand power tools. Let me give you a close-up look at it. It's a simple box made of plywood. It's got a center divider and it has doors to keep the dust out. On the inside faces of the sides and the center divider, I've glued 1/4-inch Masonite. And in the Masonite, I've cut 1/4-inch grooves. Those grooves act as drawer runners for simple drawers. These are just frames. I've used poplar with 1/4-inch Masonite bottoms. And the bottoms extend out past the sides 1/4 inch, and those run in the grooves in the case. I've got 9 sets of grooves on each side of the case, but I've only made 6 drawers, so it gives me a lot of options about how to rearrange the drawers for my storage needs. Okay, I've got a lot of plywood to cut. Let's start outside. I can't easily or safely break this plywood down on the table saw inside the workshop, so I've got it outside up on sawhorses, and I'm using the plywood cutting jig I made in an earlier video. This cut is going to give me the top panel and the 2 door panels. The top panel is 28 inches tall, so I'm making this cut at 28.5. And like I always do, I've got my depth of cut for my saw set to just score through that top layer of veneer for this first cut. That will minimize splintering on this side of the cut. Now I can cut full depth. And there are the 3 pieces I broke down to manageable size outside. They're ready for final cuts on the table saw. I'm going to put this freshly cut edge against the rip vents, and I've got the rip vents set for 26.25, the final height of the sides and the center divider. And I'm going to trim off the factory edge. And I'll cut the sides to their finished width, 15 and 13/16. The skins I'm going to cut are 1/4 inch oversize, and I'll use a router with a flush trim bit to trim them to exact size later. Now I can use a flush trim bit in the router table, which I made in an earlier video, to trim the excess Masonite from the plywood. I'm using the router table. I could use a handheld router, but I have better dust collection with the table. I always use with the router, I use hearing protection and eye protection. I've got the dado blade set up in the table saw, 1/4 inch height, and the rip fence is set to give a 3/4 inch wide rabbet. This is the center divider, and it's got skins on both sides of Masonite. Eventually, I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch off the top and a 1/2 inch off the bottom, but right now it's the same height exactly as the two sides, just so I can cut those dados all the same distance apart on all the pieces. But for the center divider, I'm going to first cut a 3/4 inch wide notch, a rabbet, on both ends, on both sides, just to establish the shoulder of where it's going to fit in the dado in the top and bottom pieces. It'll make sense when it all goes together. I haven't moved my fence at all. Still going to create a 3/4 inch wide rabbet, but I've raised the height of the blade to 3/4 of an inch. And now on both ends of both end pieces, I'll do the same thing. And I'll cut the top and bottom to their finished size, 15 9/16 by 27. For the top and the bottom, they need a centered dado to fit this center divider. So I still got the 1/4 inch dado blade set up. It's now at a 1/2 inch height, and I've got my rip fence set so it's about in the middle of the board. And I'm going to make 2 passes, flipping the stock in between, and I'll keep moving the fence a little bit further away until I end up with my 3/4 inch wide dado. And that looks like a good fit. Now for all the dados that will be the drawer runners, they're spaced 2.5 inches apart, and the dados themselves are a 1/4 inch wide and a 1/4 inch deep. And that's why I've got my dado blade set up for. The first cut is going to be 3¼ inch from the top because I've got a 3/4 inch rabbet. And the last one will be right along this edge. And now I'll cut a 1/4 inch off of the top and bottom of the center divider. And here's the case temporarily put together. center divider, I made the same width as the top and bottom. The sides are a 1/4 inch wider, so they stick out in back. I'm going to rabbet the sides a 1/4 of an inch for a 1/4 inch Masonite back. And that fits well. Now I can glue it. With the back on, the basic case is finished, so I'm going to install the casters. Tomorrow, I'll be able to work on the doors and the drawers. The bottoms of the drawers are going to be 1/4 inch Masonite. I'll cut them to width with a 1/16 inch to spare between the dadoes. And the depth will be just shy of flush with the front of the cabinet. And I'll cut enough 2-inch wide stock to make 6 drawers. And that's the kind of gap I like to see, about a 1/16 of an inch for the fronts and the backs. All 12 of these front and back pieces need a dado on the end, 3/4 of an inch wide and about half the thickness, or 3/8 of an inch deep. I use the stock itself to set the rip fence, and I've got my 1/4 inch dado set up. And to make sure the frame stays centered on the drawer bottom, I made myself a little jig. The doors take a little bit of calculation to get the right size. For the width, I'll take the full width of the cabinet and subtract a 1/16 of an inch right off the top for a 1/16 inch gap between the two doors. From the number that's left, I'll divide that by 2, and I'll subtract a 1/2 inch for each door because I'm going to have a 1/4 inch edging all the way around. And that'll be the width of the door that I cut. For the height, take the height of the cabinet, subtract a 1/16 of an inch because I'm going to add another 3/4 inch piece of plywood on top, and I want the door to clear that. And then I'll subtract a 1/2 inch for the same edging that'll go on the top and bottom. A couple of things to make this cut safer. I've got my rip fence set for a 1/4 inch cut. I'm using the table saw insert with the splitter, and I've got a push block that I can follow all the way through the cut. Now I'll get some of this edging cut and trim out the doors. Let me finish getting the tape off, we'll get them up on the cabinet. 1/16 inch gap between the doors. /16 inch here at the top, where I'm going to have another piece of 3/4 inch plywood on top. Flush with the edges. So the measurements came out right. I'll sand these and then we'll work on the hinges. Here you got a top-down look at it. This is one of the drawers. And here's where I plan on putting a hinge. And you can see the problem with most plywood, it's just notorious for having these internal voids in the inner plies. So I'm not really comfortable screwing into that edge of the plywood. So new plan, I am going to cover up the edges with solid wood edging strips. Cabinet hinges like this one generally have some sort of adjustment. This one has elongated slots. The leaf that fastens to the cabinet has an elongated slot vertically. So I can adjust the cabinet side of the hinge up and down. The door leaf has elongated slots horizontally, so I'll be able to move the door in and out. Position the hinge where you want it and mark the sides like I've done here. Bring the door into position, And remember, I wanted my doors a 1/16 of an inch gap here to clear the top that's going to go on last. And I'll transfer these marks to the door. Now let me turn it upside down. Use those 2 marks in the hinge. Outline the hinge like I'd already done. Now I need to turn the hinge over because the bevel is on this side. This is what fits the screw head, so make sure you got the bevel the right direction. I'll locate it in that outline. And you can see I've already drilled these 2 holes. Now I can go back and drill the holes in the cabinet side. Only these 2 outside ones, the elongated ones. You can see there's a 3rd hole. This will be the very last thing I do. Drill this hole and screw a screw into it to lock it down once I've got both doors on and have them adjusted where I want. If you're going to be doing a lot of hinges, you want a bit like this because it centers it in these holes. And that keeps the bit from wandering away. Now, I'll mount the hinges to the doors first, and then I'll mount them to the cabinet. And that fits good all the way around. It feels good. Good gap in between the doors and along the top. So now I'll install these last screws. To install the door pulls, I always use this jig to mark the locations for the screw holes, because it works on both sides. And these I've already marked and actually pre-drilled a small hole as a starter hole. Now I can drill for the screws. Backer board. The last step is going to be to add another piece of plywood as a separate work surface on the top. I'll cut the plywood to exactly the same width and depth as the case, and then I'll add 1/4 inch edging strip around it. I think this is going to be a handy addition to my workshop. It even fits under the wing of the table saw. And once Mrs. Tim Can saw it, now I have to build her one. Guys, thanks for watching.